So the last 30 days has been a really good month for open source Bitcoin hardware. In mid-August, we saw the official releases of both the Sparrow and Electrum wallets add official support for the DIY Jade devices using a broader range of hardware than was previously supported. At the start of September, a less well-known company called Satochip actually completed a round of funding, and they are a company basically that makes open source smart card based devices. They actually fill an important gap in terms of a lot of the DIY offerings that are available at the moment. And finally, in mid-September, we saw both the SeedSigner and the Krux projects have major releases that they haven't had for a while, and both platforms saw some major improvements in terms of the user experience for those wallets, and also some improvements just in terms of their processes and maturity as a platform. So great news all around. What makes all of these pieces of hardware and software so special is that they are all interoperable, making it really easy to mix and match different components with different strengths and weaknesses so they can complement each other. So in this video, basically what I'm going to do is run through how to set up and use a DIY hardware only multi-vendor multi-sig wallet, basically just as a way to showcase these devices a bit, to talk about their relative strengths and weaknesses, as well as show how you can use each of them either individually or together. And if you haven't already done so, hit subscribe, and that way you can stay in the loop for content I make to help you find your way in the crazy and often hostile environment that is cryptocurrency. Alright, so let's just start with a bit of a hardware overview and the relative strengths and weaknesses of some of these devices. So if we start with the first and probably most well-known of these DIY projects, we have the SeedSigner. Now, I've put the price at about 60 USD, which is I think what you can do these for reasonably if you get cheap components and a printed case. Obviously, you can pay a bit more for a kit. I've listed the assembly difficulty as medium in that these devices are essentially just a few boards that sort of press fit together, though some people do run into trouble like soldering header pins onto the Raspberry Pi board, though you can buy them pre-soldered, and just doing things like messing up connecting the camera and so on. So I think that's medium difficulty. The hardware security for these devices is low in that it is just a Raspberry Pi general purpose computer with a micro SD card, so something that really doesn't have any measures in place at all to protect the physical security of the device or the software running on the micro SD card, which is mitigated to some extent by the fact that this runs statelessly. The only connectivity you have for this is basically for the camera and the screen, so it uses QR codes, and as of right now you can't actually buy a retail version of this device. If we move on to the Jade, these can be done extremely cheaply. You know, you can do a Liligo T display for $10. You can get a case for $2 or $3, so they can be incredibly cheap. Or you can go for something that's a bit more expensive, has like a battery, buttons, 3D printed case, and the whole shebang. In terms of assembly difficulty, the Jade is extremely accessible, and you can just buy, ready-made devices that just work straight off the shelf, battery, case, and everything. Though you will notice that these options don't include a camera. If you do want a camera, you do have to get boards and sort of stick them together. It is a bit more complicated than the SeedSigner because it's not just a press fit header to header kind of thing, but anyway, it's still very doable. The hardware security for these Jade devices is quite good if you have enabled secure boot. The advantage here is that the way they have done their blind pin server setup basically gives you a lot of the benefits of a secure element without actually needing one. If we look at the connectivity for these Jade devices, basically you can use the screen and the camera and QR. You can also connect via USB, and you can also connect via Bluetooth to these devices, with Bluetooth giving you the added benefit of providing an extra layer of physical security in terms of being able to authenticate that this is the actual hardware device that you had paired with before and that someone hasn't swapped that out. And you can also just buy a Jade at retail. They are also very affordable, very good product. Next we have Krux, and the device I'll be using for this one is the Makes Amigo, just because it has a nice big screen and nice touchscreen. You can also use the M5 Stick V, which is really very tiny. It has the same functionality, but it's just much smaller. The assembly difficulty is very easy for most of these Krux devices. They just come completely ready-made. You just flash the software, though it is possible to build one a bit more complicated for this if you want. I've listed the hardware security of the Krux as medium. It is still quite low, but it's better than the SeedSigner in that the Krux software lives on the device itself. The device itself does have the ability to verify the checksum of updates and only apply them if they're signed by a trusted signer, just like a commercial wallet, though the bootloader on this device cannot be locked. So there's nothing stopping someone who has the physical device from flashing malicious firmware onto it. Just like with the SeedSigner, that sort of security issue is mostly mitigated by running it statelessly. And in terms of connectivity on Krux, basically we can use either the camera and the screen, or we can also use a micro SD to move our Bitcoin transactions around. Right, and finally we have the Satochip. Now, in terms of price, you can get one of these for about 20 to 30 bucks. Though the thing I'll say here is it's much cheaper if you order multiple cards, and you also will need to drop, 5 or 10 bucks on a smart card reader, either a wired one or NFC. The assembly difficulty is obviously easy because you don't actually have to do any assembly. The hardware security for these Satochip devices is very high, and really it's not even the same category as any of these other devices in it. These are actual smart cards running the Java card OS, so devices that are designed from the ground up to have extremely high physical security. And all of those before we even start talking about the security you can add by loading additional applets onto here to be able to verify this is your device before you go entering device pins or anything like that into it. So connectivity wise, you can connect to this thing wirelessly using NFC or by using a smart card reader that connects to this chip here. You can also buy these devices at retail for 25 euros plus free shipping. So yeah, definitely incredibly affordable. All right, so that's an overview of the devices. Let's add these to a wallet. All right, so we'll start off in Sparrow. So I'm going to say File and say New Wallet, and we'll just call this DIY MultiSig Demo. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to firstly choose policy type to be multi-signature, and in terms of script type we are just going to leave it as native SegWit. Now here for cosigners, I'm going to increase the maximum number, so the N for the cosigners, to be 4. I'm actually just going to set the number of cosigners required to be 4, just because I want to demo the signing workflow on all 4 of the devices. This is where I will just stop and say MultiSig is for advanced users. It is a very easy way to accidentally lose funds, particularly if you do something like this and have a 4 of 4 multisig or 2 of 2 or something like that. So you need to be really clear that if you have a multisig set up like this and you lose one of those signers, those funds are unrecoverable. And even if you have, say, a 2 of 3 multisig or 3 of 5, you still need to keep the public keys for each of the signers. The backups for multisig are different to single sig, and it is very important that you understand that very clearly before you put any funds in multisig. And again, my suggestion for most people actually is to start out with something like the Casa product, which is a managed multisig solution, and then only once you're comfortable being able to sort of reverse engineer and understand what they have done, would you consider moving on to multisig yourself. So basically once we've set our quorum and our script type, we're going to add our signers. So for the first one, we will say we have an air-gapped hardware wallet. I will just select that I have a SeedSigner, so I can say scan. And basically over here on the SeedSigner, what I'm going to do is, firstly, I actually just need to scan a seed QR into this. I'm not going to worry about a BIP39 passphrase, so I'll say done. And basically what I'm going to do now is I want to export XPub. I want to select the multisig XPub, and I want native SegWit. So this matches what I've selected in Sparrow. So I'll say OK, and then I'll just say Sparrow. And it gives me a privacy warning. I'll say I understand. There we go. So it's given us the details of that XPub, and I'll press export XPub, and that gives us a QR code. And I'll just press the up arrow to increase the brightness. Move it into the center. So that is now scanned. So the SeedSigner is in. Okay, so next one I'm going to do is the Jade. And look, I will just say that it is a connected hardware wallet. I'll let that start up. And then I'll say scan. And it's going to ask me for the PIN, so I'll just put that in. Oop, hang on. I'll just go back, scan again. There we go. So the Jade is there. And if we click show derivation, you'll see it's put the multisig derivation path on there. We're just going to leave that as a default. We're not going to touch it, and we'll just say import key store. There we go. The other thing I'll quickly say with the Jade is we also could, if we wanted to, add it as an air-gapped wallet, scan it just like with the SeedSigner. And to do that, basically on the Jade, we can actually just select options, wallet, and export XPub. And choose that we want a multi-sig wallet. And basically then the workflow is exactly the same that we had on the SeedSigner. Anyway, won't worry about that. So for keystore 3, we say we're going to have an air-gapped hardware wallet. And again, for this one, we can just say that it's a SeedSigner just because Krux is exactly the same. So basically for Krux, we'll just load the mnemonic in. I'll just load it in using a camera, and I'll just scan a QR code. So this is the one that I had in my previous Krux video to load the mnemonic, and we're not going to worry about a BIP39 passphrase. That's the right fingerprint, and we are going to choose on Krux that we want a multi-sig wallet. Okay, so basically what we're going to do now is we're going to say extended public key, and we will just press the button, and that gives the next pub that we can scan in Sparrow. There it is. So that's scanned that in, and we'll just call that Krux here. Alright, so that's that one done. Alright, now for the Satochip, we're going to do this a little bit differently in that there isn't native support in Sparrow or the official release of Electrum for the Satochip. So what we're going to do is actually use Electrum to handle the Satochip for the signing, and we're going to use Sparrow for the other three. And I'll just show you how nicely those work together. So basically, we've got Sparrow, and we'll just move that over to there. All right, and what I have right here actually is a fork of Electrum for the Satochip. This might not actually be necessary once native support is included. So we can call this anything, but we'll call it the same thing that we had in Sparrow, so DIY MultiSig demo. And we'll say next. And what we're going to do is we're going to say we have a multi-signature wallet because we're going to recreate what we have over here in Sparrow. Say next. And we are going to increase these numbers to be the same as before. This screen over here in Electrum is the same as this slider here in Sparrow, and we'll say next. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is actually add these three signers into Electrum. So what we're going to do is in Electrum for cosigner 1, we'll say I have a master key, and we'll say next. And we are just going to take the extended public key here from Sparrow. But what we actually want to do is show it as a Z pub. You'll see if we press that button there, how it changes between a Z pub and an X pub. And what we're going to do to make sure Electrum knows what kind of wallet we're trying to make is use the Z pub. So we're going to copy that into Electrum, say next. And we can see the master public key matches what we just put in. We'll say next. Now we'll also add cosigner number 2. Now the one thing I will quickly say actually is the order in which you add these key stores doesn't matter. It'll work it out. So we're also going to add the Jade. So again, I'll switch that to a Z pub and put it in, say next. And then for signer 3, we'll add the extended public key from Krux as a Z pub. Next. And for cosigner number 4, now we are up to the Satochip. So I'm going to say I want to cosign with a hardware device. I could do this using NFC, but we'll just use their device. And we stick our Satochip in the smart card reader, and we say next. And there we can see the Satochip there. This one's already initialized, so we'll just say next. And then we'll just put in unlock the Satochip. We'll just leave the script type and derivation path alone, say next. And I'm not going to worry about encrypting this wallet file. So now we actually have our completed wallet in Electrum, and what we just need to do is finish setting up in Sparrow. So I'm just going to say wallet information, and then go to cosigner 4, take that public key there, and I'm actually going to stick it in Sparrow. So in Sparrow, I'm going to choose an XPub or watch only wallet, paste that in there, and I'll also just copy that derivation path in. We can change the fingerprint to match, but it doesn't really matter, but I'll just do it anyway. There we go. And now over in Sparrow, I can say apply. I won't worry about a password. So now that I've got this wallet over here in Sparrow, I can hit receive and get a Bitcoin address. And the great thing is, if I go into Sparrow, into receive, you'll see that we actually get the same address. Now, the last thing I want to do now that I have this wallet set up is export it again back onto some of my devices. So we'll actually just use Sparrow for this. So basically still on the settings page, if I go down now and click on export, and so basically on this export screen, what I'm going to do is for the SeedSigner, we'll go down to, there we go, Spectre Desktop and say show. And we're going to show this QR code to the SeedSigner. So basically here we get our SeedSigner, we say scan, and we're going to scan that QR code. There we go. And you can actually see here, it's got the wallet descriptor loaded. So it tells us about the type of wallet, tells us about the fingerprints, and so on. So that is great. So we can say OK. Now, in terms of the Jade, if we actually have it connected via USB or Bluetooth, this is very easy. So we'll actually just close that for a second for the Jade, and we'll just go into Receive, and we'll click Display Address. And basically what you'll see over here on the Jade is actually when we go to display the receive address, we'll automatically register the MultiSig wallet. So we'll just click through the details of the wallet there, the same 4 signers, and we will say that we want to register the MultiSig. And there we go, it's registered and showing us the address. So we'll just click tick, and the Jade is done. And for Krux, we can choose wallet descriptor, load one, yes. and basically we can just get the same wallet descriptor that we used for the SeedSigner. We'll just scan that. It's a whopping great big one. There we go. And it has scanned that now. So just like before, we can see it's got the name of the MultiSig wallet plus the 4 signers, and I'll say load yes. Wallet descriptor output loaded. There we go. And Satochip doesn't support that. It is a much simpler device. All right, so now that we have exported our MultiSig wallet to our different signing devices, what that means is that we get two things. Firstly, it allows us to verify the receive addresses for our MultiSig wallet, just to make sure that our wallet software isn't lying to us or something like that. And secondly, it allows us to verify when we sign transactions going out, which of the outputs are change addresses, so which ones belong to our wallet. Okay, so let's just send some Bitcoin there. All right, so that has now popped up in both wallets. So what I'm going to do now is send these funds. All right, so basically in terms of sending our transaction, we can actually send that using either Sparrow or Electrum, but I'll just start off in Sparrow because that is where most of our signers are. We'll just call this return. And rather than just send max, what we're actually going to do is we'll just send about half. That way you can see how a change output is going to be handled along the way since we've registered this device. So we'll say create a transaction. We can see those 3 outputs there, and we'll finalize, and now we're ready to start signing. So let's say show QR, and we'll just sign in the same order we're doing everything else. So on the SeedSigner, we'll just say scan the animated QR. There we go. So basically now we just choose the signer, which is the seed we imported before. It's parsing the PSBT, and we can basically see it has correctly labeled one of those outputs as the change. So we can review the details of the transaction. It even shows us the math. We can review the recipients, which is great. It's correctly identified the change output because we loaded the descriptor before, so we can say next, and basically we can approve the PSBT. What we'll do is we'll say scan QR here in Sparrow. There we go. So that is signed with the SeedSigner. So great. So what we'll do now is we will sign with the Jade, connected over USB. So I'll just say sign, select the Jade there, so we can see the output. So we'll say yep, and we can choose to sign the transaction. There we go. So it's now signed with the Jade. Basically for Krux, we can just show QR. We just want to sign. We'll say we want to sign a PSBT. We'll just scan. There we go. So there's the transaction that we can see on Krux. So we've got the inputs, we've got the spend. It tells us how much we're sending back to ourselves. So we'll say good. So we're going to press the down arrow button there. So basically there's the spend. That's the one we send back to the tip address. That has correctly identified the change output again. And we can say we want to sign it. Yes. So there is the QR code. So now back in Sparrow, I want to say scan QR. We can see it's picking that one up in Krux automatically. Great, we are signed. Okay, so for this last sign to get it into Electrum, we are just going to save the transaction, and I'll just save that on my PC. Where I save it doesn't matter. And basically what I'm going to do now here on Electrum is I'm going to go Tools, Load Transaction from File. I'll select the file that I got from Sparrow, and basically we can see here the same transaction details in Electrum that we could see before on our other devices. And so here we'll just say sign, and basically this will think about it for a second, and you can see now that has sent it off to a Cosigner service via Electrum. And I can actually see that's popped up now on the Cosigner device that I have here, and we can also confirm the details of that transaction, though you'll notice here that if a device doesn't actually highlight for us which one is the change output. That's something we just have to manually check for ourselves in this instance, but that all looks good. So we'll say approve TX over here on the app, and then we can see that within a few seconds that will think about it here. There we go, and that is signed. So basically now we can either just broadcast that fully signed transaction here in Electrum, or we can save it back as a file and load the transaction. We can load the signed file, which now has the signature from the Satochip. So if I just say broadcast, basically that transaction is sent. So there you go. One of the really great things about the Bitcoin ecosystem is the fact that so many great open source hardware and software tools exist, making it really easy for you to be able to operate securely, whether using a single sig or a multi-sig setup, without having to place huge amounts of trust in a particular wallet vendor. At a time when the prices for hardware wallets have been generally going up as the number of features increase, it's been really fantastic just to see a number of really affordable and really accessible DIY options, especially those that don't actually require any hardware assembly at all. You know, really accessible for everyone. To be clear, DIY is definitely not for everyone, and there's nothing at all wrong with just buying a device at retail. And if you have any questions about the process that I've done in this video or any of the open source projects that I have used, just leave a reply in the comments. I do my best to answer all of them. So anyway, stay safe. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. Hit like if you think that other people would find this video useful, and hit subscribe if you'd like to be kept in the loop about future content I make that helps people stay safe in the crypto space and to recover if they get into trouble. If you have any questions about this video or a topic that you'd like me to cover, just leave a reply.